In the wake of the announcement last night that Darren Wilson would not be indicted, President Obama gave an address to the nation. Here are his words.
First and foremost, we are a nation built on the rule of law. And so we need to accept that this decision was the grand jury's to make. There are Americans who agree with it, and there are Americans who are deeply disappointed, even angry. It's an understandable reaction. But I join Michael's parents in asking anyone who protests this decision to do so peacefully. Let me repeat Michael's father's words. Hurting others or destroying property is not the answer. No matter what the grand jury decides, I do not want my son's death to be in vain. And we need to recognize that the situation in Ferguson speaks to broader challenges that we still face as a nation. The fact is, in too many parts of this country, a deep distrust exists between law enforcement and communities of color. Some of this is the result of the legacy of racial discrimination in this country. And this is tragic because nobody needs good policing more than poor communities with higher crime rates. We need to recognize that this is not just an issue for Ferguson. This is an issue for America.
So I've seen quite a bit of condemnation of what Obama said there. I mean, many people, I think, justifiably would have liked a little bit more passion or excitement or even obvious interest in what happened. I understand that he feels very often in this sort of situation that he's supposed to be sort of the calmer-in-chief, I suppose. But I love that this is the guy that Fox News says is an angry black man and emotional and all that. I mean, you could not have been more level-headed makes it sound too complimentary, but lacking in emotion.
Dispassionate.
Dispassionate, there you go.
Dispassionate would be the term.
That's a good
I'm
word.
going to defend him here. I disagree with you guys. I thought a lot of presidents wouldn't have said anything historically.
Yeah, that's true.
He said something, and the focal point of what he said was people have a right to be angry.
Yeah.
And,
I'm not saying I hate what he said.
Yeah,
I'm just saying
but
that I would have gone farther.
Look, this is how he talks. He doesn't, and the fact is, you're the president of the United States. You can't get out and scream that the grand jury came back, that the system is rigged.
Yeah.
No president would do that. Maybe we wish we lived in a world where they did.
You know what, Ben? I don't know. Was it 12 years? How many years? I don't know. But a lot of years, the LAPD was under a consent decree, meaning that they couldn't be trusted to police without oversight.
Yeah.
How come that hasn't happened with Ferguson?
It may happen with Ferguson. It may
Does that take a while? I mean,
it does. Well, as the federal grand jury, and John has things on this about other ways that either the Ferguson police or the Darren Wilson could still face consequences in court for killing an unarmed man in the line of duty. The federal investigation continues. You know what we saw in 1964 in Philadelphia. Mississippi, when we saw guys acquitted in the murder of the 3 civil rights workers down there by a jury in Mississippi, then all of a sudden they were indicted on civil rights charges and found guilty.
Yeah.
That probably can't happen here because you can't. The standard for showing racial animus in a case like that is really high. In Mississippi, those guys were in the Klan. Right? So the cops who did that made it a little easier. No one is saying Darren Wilson said, "I'm going to run you down, you black bastard," or that we don't have that here.
Yeah.
We can presume it, but you could never convince a jury that was a motivator, which is why that part is unlikely. But that doesn't mean that a civil rights investigation of the Ferguson Police Department could not definitely end in a taken to a judge and a judge resulting in a consent decree in Ferguson.
I mean, as far as we had a little discussion about the frustration with Obama this morning, and it's not in what he says. At least this is from my point of view. He always says the right thing or the safe thing and all that stuff. We know how that works. So in saying, yeah, there shouldn't be any violence, of course, who's going to disagree with that? Except people who are committing the violence. And then after that, well, we got to do something about the relationship between minority communities and the police officers that, quote, protect them when they don't. So he said that too. Oh, that's good. So we know that. We already know that, especially people in those communities. They know that. When are you going to do something about it? Or at least explain further where the problem lies. And just like, it's been from a history of racial animosity and racial tensions. And let me go back home now.
Yeah.
So therefore, we're going to do something about this.
Yeah.
Therefore, we're going to implement things where police officers have to have some kind of a connection to the community. And a couple days ago, or at least yesterday, Giuliani was saying we need to hire, or his city wasn't on the list of cities that didn't have enough black and Latinos on the force. there needs to be opportunities. You're just going to hire someone from the streets? So that's an empty statement to say, too. We hire black and Latinos. Who? And why?
Yeah.
Like, you need to hire them so they can represent the people that they're protecting. So when they don't feel they're protected, we need to change the way it's happening. So he's saying all this. Yeah, he says it, and then he goes back home, and then the people who are being murdered sit there and go, oh, that sounded good.
Yeah.
What does this mean for us? Nothing. It means nothing. He doesn't do anything about it. Because if he does something about it, people against him and the people who hate him that didn't vote for him are going to attack him and say, how dare he does something for these black people? What was he elected for? To do nothing for black people. That's why he's done nothing for black people, because he's afraid of people.
I think you're
criticizing him for doing
I hear you.
something.
I think you're being unfair.
I think he's going to get his lawyer from Goldman Sachs, Eric Holder, to get right on this.
Look, you guys criticize Eric Holder. Eric Holder's been great about these issues. He gets an A on this. He might get an F on financial reform, but he gets an A on this. He's been good. He's worked with communities all over the place. Their enforcement of civil rights issues has been big. They've bolstered a civil rights division that was decimated under the Bush administration. And they've gone after communities and police departments across the country, and they've gone after voting rights issues. So they have been good.
Yeah.
He doesn't give a big passionate speech, but except for the two huge race speeches, which are considered his best speeches.
I wish I knew.
We should do something. Again,
But what do you want them to do? They literally have done it in communities. They've done
it. Nothing has changed. Next week, someone else is going to get murdered, and he's going to come back out and say, you know what? We don't want any violence, and we don't want citizens to keep getting murdered.
Here's how that changes. You're right.
One.
There hasn't been enormous instant change because the federal government cannot make police departments behave in a certain way. We don't live in that country. But what they have done is the federal government can use the enormous power that it has to rain down holy hell on police departments like they did in Los Angeles after the Rampart scandal. The consent
So you think
decrees,
that'll probably happen here?
I think it has already happened to police departments under the Obama administration. Every civil rights expert who's here would say that the civil rights division under Barack Obama has been bolstered and been strong. That's where Eric Holder gets good grades.
Yeah.
Where he doesn't get good grades is sending bad guys on Wall Street to prison.
Okay, well, I just wish I knew the parts that you're wrong so I could nail you on them. But can I say quickly, the grand jury evidence, if you look at it all, reveals way more inconsistencies in Darren Wilson's story than the prosecutor was saying. Inconsistency, he was pointing out the inconsistency in the witnesses.
Yeah.
By the way, you don't present the inconsistent eyewitness testimony at a grand fucking jury.
Yeah.
You take away, you get the witnesses that line up with what you think happened as a prosecutor, and you dismiss the rest of them. That's why you don't give them to them, which is what we've been saying over and over. But here, I'll give you 5 really quick things that this grand jury testimony reveals as being holes in the story. Wilson washed away the blood evidence. He washed it away. Number 2, the first officer to interview Wilson failed to take any notes. Number 3, the investigators failed to measure the likely distance between Brown and Wilson. Didn't measure it.
Yeah.
Number 4, investigators did not test Wilson's gun for fucking fingerprints. So we don't know who tried to grab the gun.
When the entire thing seems to be about
it's
whether
all
or not he grabbed
about
the gun.
did he grab the gun or not. Number 5, Wilson did not immediately turn his weapon over to investigators after killing him. All this shit is fucking red flags everywhere. That's what the prosecutor should have said. That's why I'm going to indict him anyway. Well, that's what he should have said. I don't care what this grand jury said. I have prosecutorial discretion. I'm going to indict him anyway. He should have said that fucking stuff. Yeah. But instead he says the other shit that a defense contractor said. I knew I'd get upset.
Well, look, Jimmy, you're going to get even more upset because it's even worse than that. I mean, the inconsistencies like, so I saw him reach down to his waistband, even though prior he'd already said, I didn't think he had a gun. And he didn't have a gun, so why does it matter that he was reaching out his waistband, which normally would be an opportunity for a prosecutor in a case like this to cross-examine him, but he opted not to. About any of the inconsistencies, he wasn't
didn't
interested enough.
cross-examine him?
No, there was no cross-examination of all of these inconsistencies in
By the
Darren
way,
Wilson's testimony.
And his initial interview with detectives, Darren Wilson's initial interview, completely conflicts with the information he gave during his testimony.